A new Trackmania season is upon us with the release of the Winter 24 campaign, and that means I am back with yet another tier list video. I'll be rating every track on the Trackmania plus to minus scale, and I will also be ranking every track against ones from previous seasons. The latter will allow us to see how I feel this season compares to previous seasons, and whether track quality is trending up like it has been for the past few, trending down, or just staying the same. And with that out of the way, let's jump into it here with track number 1. For me, this season's track number 1 is a bit on the weaker side, as we can see on the top of the screen. Rated this one 10th out of the 15 track number 1s, so not a great spot there. Overall, not a ton going on with the track itself. A couple of very minor turns, a drop down onto some boosters, and then a longer straight towards the finish. And again, overall, I found this track to just be fairly boring and weaker than a majority of track number 1s. On the plus minus rating scale, I am going to give it a plus due to there being no neutral rating in this series. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, so I can't give it a minus, so it is going to be a plus. Track number 2 has a couple of things going for it, at least over track number 1. It has a couple of drifts in it, so it is far more exciting to drive. Still not the most exciting, but at least there's a little bit something there. Those couple of drifts also make this the 8th best track number 2, just one over last season's, so not too bad there. Overall, the track is decent. I even contemplated giving this one a plus, but I don't think it quite got there. It needs something a little bit extra to push it over, but I did end up giving this one a plus. For this track, it's really just what you see is what you get, just going for the tightest lines possible. It's a fairly boring experience, honestly. It results in this track getting 8th place. At least it's a jump up from last season's 11th place. One thing that can suck about the track is the landing bug with the snow car once you jump onto the wood. Hopefully, they are trying to fix that. We'll see what happens. If it does get fixed, maybe it can even jump up a couple spots. We'll see. I'll look back on it. But for now, this track is getting a plus. So I do have a bit of bias towards grass tracks. They are my favorite styles, and maybe that comes into play here, but overall, I did think this was a very good track. This time, just one behind last season's, getting 5th place, so a very good ranking there. I do wish the end of the track was a little bit different. The long straight lines at ends of tracks, long straight jumps, they do get a bit overused. Luckily this season they are at a minimum, unlike previous seasons where they were using them over and over again. But I do wish something different was done there. But overall, very solid track, and this one is going to be the first one in the plus. So this season's track number 4 and track number 5 are pretty much a carbon copy of last year's. Last year's got number 4 on each of them. This year's are getting number 5 on each of them. Can't really complain too much about that. All the tracks have been fairly good in this spot as of late. The only complaints I really have about this track is at the end, getting gear 5. It's kind of in a very awkward spot. You can sometimes get a good gear up, but it's very unlikely. But that's really the only complaints about the track. Overall, very good, and this is going to be another plus. So before we go over Winter 24's score here, we're going to go over how these point totals work. The worst rated track gets 1 point, the second worst rated track gets 2 points. This time around, the top rated track has a possible of 15 points, and that 15 times the 5 tracks in the White Series is how we get a score out of 75. As for the Winter 24 season, we can see it scoring 44 points, putting it in 6th place, which seems about right. We had 2 above average tracks and 3 average tracks, so it seems very fitting for it to be in this position. I do have plenty of thoughts and opinions on the white tracks and the season as a whole. We'll go over that more towards the end of the video, but for now, let's move on to the green tracks. As it stands, I think track number 6 is a pretty good track overall, but it's missing something a little bit to push it over the edge into a next tier. This results in a fairly average rating, or just above average, getting 6th place here, so not the worst. But the track overall is pretty short. It basically has 2 turns in it. I feel like if they lengthen the track maybe 5 or so seconds, added an extra turn in this one, I think it would fare a lot better. It is a borderline plus plus track for me, but as it is right now, it is just going to get a plus. There are a lot of things I could say about track number 7, but for the most part, you can all round them up into the same kind of feeling, is that I absolutely hate this track, and that reflects in its rating here, the lowest so far this season, getting spot number 11. All these rounded over grass parts, absolutely hate them. Any little bit of a mistake on the entrance, on the exit, you can just go absolutely flying out of these, just completely ruin your run. Extremely annoying track to drive, and I wish to never drive it again. My rating for this track, maybe it could even be worse than what I gave it. It's only going to get a minus, but I do not like this track at all. It would not be track number 8 without the bumpy downhill track, and even with the snow car on this one, I do believe this is the most drivable track number 8 they have made, with the snow car bugs and all, and this results in a average ranking here being spot number 8. And if the hitbox update for this car does work out well, I believe this ranking could jump up a little bit, and its rating could improve as well. For now, it is going to get a minus, but if that hitbox update does work out well and reduce or eliminate the landing bugs, I would update this to a plus. In my opinion, I think track number 9 has a lot of missing potential, especially when it comes to the length and the finish on the track. This will result in it getting a slightly above average ranking, only landing at spot number 7, but it could be so much higher. You know, the ending to this track is just grabbing a reactor boost and driving uphill towards a finish, but after this left-hand ice slide here, I wish after grabbing the reactor boost, or maybe not even having a reactor boost, there was another ice slide back down towards the right here. I feel like that would have been a much better ending to the track, and have the track lengthened out a little bit more. Really not a bad track overall. It is going to get a plus rating for me, but it was a borderline plus plus. I honestly have no idea what to even say about track number 10. It has to be one of the most average and one of the most forgettable tracks of all time. At least it's that way for me. I can't even think of really any positives about the track. There's really no negatives to the track. It's kind of just there, very basic. Change cars a couple of times, make a couple of turns, get your way to the finish. I don't know, I guess that explains every track, but there is just nothing going on with this one. You know, there's nothing bad with it, so I'm not giving it a negative rating here, so it's just going to get a plus. Looking at the scores for the green tracks, we can see the Winter 24 season scoring 40 points, and that puts it in 11th place. Now, I do believe this is it looks worse than it actually is. There's a 10-point drop down to the next worst one, and all the way up into 6th place, it's only a 5-point difference. Like I said, in track number 8, that one could gain a couple of spots there, therefore dropping some other ones down if they do fix the snow car landing bugs. So it could change things up a little bit, but really, you know, it's basically just an average set of tracks. As far as full speed tracks goes, I think track number 11 is on the weaker side of them. That results in this one getting an 8th place rating here. So not the worst, not the best. I believe this track falls short in the latter half of it after the plastic looping. There's really not much going on with the track unless the strategy has changed after this looping to go for a speed slide. Right now it is just a no slide, so this is a very boring, just kind of straight section. And the same could be said after this small wall right here, just a little bit of wiggling or speed sliding into the finish. So overall, a fairly boring track in the second half really makes this one fall a bit short, and it is going to get a plus rating. So track number 12 is going to get a pretty good ranking overall here, getting 5th place, but I do believe there are a few flaws with this track, and one thing I just don't like personally. First of all, the opening jump feels a bit miscalculated. Maybe at first it was meant to jump straight off, which gives you a perfectly clean landing, but now you have to jump over to the right for the checkpoint, and it makes the jump come up just a tiny bit short, and the landing is not all that clean there. In the middle of the track, we also have a opportunity to gear up into 5, but it would be a bad gear up, so you have to throttle manage to avoid that, which is a little bit annoying. It's not the end of the world. It's pretty easy to avoid. I wish it was just a little bit cleaner in that regard. I also just dislike water in this game, so that is a personal thing for me. Wish that was not in the track, but the track overall works extremely well. Again, getting 5th place, and for the plus minus rating on this one, it is going to get a plus, but it was another borderline plus plus. Man, what could have been the potential of track number 13? I feel like it has the most lost potential of the entire campaign, and that results in it only getting 7th place here. I feel like the first half of this track is excellent. It couldn't really have been much better than it is. Very fun, but after the wall jump, there is just really nothing to the track. The end on this one could not have been any more boring. The back half also has the issue after this jump right here, where you can land and drop back down into gear 3, and there's really not a whole lot you can do about it. Again, really the most lost potential here. If the end was any bit different, this would easily have been a plus plus track, and hell, maybe even a triple plus, but so much is lost in the second half of this track for me, and it resulted in only getting a plus. Track number 14 is a pretty good track overall. It does have things going for it and against it, but it still results in an above average ranking here, getting 6th place. First of all, I think it is very well calculated for a snow kart track. It avoids jumps, so there are no landing bugs, so that is a huge plus. It also is very drivable with Action Key 2 for 40% steering. But its flaws, obviously, we have a skip at the beginning or cut at the beginning, whatever you want to call it. So that is a minus. I also don't like the dirt uphill. You can have a ton of speed going into that, and it almost feels impossible not to fly out of that dirt uphill if you do have that high amount of speed. So a couple of things going for it, a couple of things going against it. It is going to result in a plus rating, but we have lots of tracks that are borderline plus plus, and this is certainly a 1. And here we are with the final blue track, track number 15, and I think this is an excellent track overall, and that will reflect in its rating as well, getting 4th place, the highest ranking so far. When I was doing the discovery for this campaign, I remember just not liking this track at all. I thought it was a bit strange. I just did not like the driving over the thin roads. It was very hard to not hit all the penalty areas. But as I played the track more, got used to it, got the lines down a little bit more, the track grew on me, and now I like it a lot. Now, I do believe it is missing, the smallest amount to kind of push it over the edge into the next tier. I don't know what exactly that could be, because it is a very good track as it is right now. But right now, I also only have it as a plus plus, because I do feel like it is just not quite there for the triple plus rating. But overall, again, just a very good track. Taking a look at the blue series of tracks, we can see the Winter 24 season tying with Summer 23 with 50 points, and that puts them in 5th place. Now, 5th place, you got to think, well, that's not too bad out of 15 seasons, and you're right, but I feel like there is a lot of just missed points here. Track number 13 was such a lackluster ending. It could have gotten, anywhere from 1 to maybe even 4 points better if the ending was just any better than it currently is. Track number 14 without the cut could have netted 1 or 2 points, and this could have put it up into the second best set of blue tracks ever made. But again, here we got 5th place, not too bad overall, could have been far worse, and just an overall nice set of tracks. So track number 16 was a pretty tough track for me to judge because it contains quite a few things that I don't really care for, and I try to keep my biases aside in that regard for its rating and ranking as well, as this one's going to get 6th place. I don't really care for sausage, and I don't really care for the cruise control. Honestly, maybe more so, I think the cruise control hurts it here. Because I feel like you should be able to push yourself as hard as you want on tracks like this. If you need to slow down or go slower, that's on you to do, but I feel like you should be able to go as fast as you possibly can and not be held by the track itself. Now again, amongst the other track 16s, this only got 6th place, so just above average, and honestly don't feel like that does this track justice, because I do believe it is a better track than it shows in that regard, because on the plus minus scale, I did give this one a plus. So just a solid track overall, even if it contains some things I don't really care for. Track number 17 is another hard track for me to judge, more so frustrating to judge, because I think the route on the track is excellent, but again, we have problems with the snow car itself and its landing bugs. This track has 4 jumps in it. We have the big jump that will be coming up, obviously can land bug that, and then near the very end of the track, within like 8 seconds, there are 3 more jumps, all of which can be landing bugs, and I even landing bug on this run here. So yeah, I think the route on this track is excellent. The problems more so come from the snow car itself. Really needs to be updated, and they are addressing it apparently. So hopefully that does fix it. As of now, it only gets 7th place. Could easily jump up in that regard. Also, its rating as well could jump up to a plus with the fixes. But as of now, it is only going to get a plus. So again, I tried to keep my personal biases aside, but track number 18 is a very tough one to judge in that regard, because again, like track number 16, I don't care for sausage all that much, and then I also don't care for tech. It is one of my least favorite styles of track. And then on top of that, we also have reactor boost. It's kind of just a nightmare scenario for me as far as track goes. But I don't think it's the worst track in the world. It's just not for me. So I did try to, be fair to it and give it number 8 here. So it could be worse. It could be better. Just nothing for me on this track that I really enjoy. Now, as for the plus or minus ranking on this one, I can certainly see the quality of the track here. It's just not for me. If you enjoy tech and sausage, you will certainly rate it higher. But for me, I am going to give it a plus, a little bit of leniency there, despite me not really caring for the track whatsoever, because I can't see the quality of the track itself. So I feel like I'm repeating myself a ton here in these red tracks, but this is another tough one that I had to judge here, because on one hand, I think this is a cool and unique track, but on the other hand, I feel like the large majority of this track is just being driven for me, with all the different wall rides. All you do is have to get into them decently and then just hold a single direction. And again, I just feel like the large majority of this track is being driven for me. This results in a slightly above average rating here, getting 7th place. So it could be worse, but I feel like this track could be a whole lot better if it didn't rely so much on these wall rides and had a little bit more substance to the track in between them, with less of them on the track as well. I would also say a track like this, the style of the track, not this exact track here, would be more fitting for a blue or maybe even a green series track, because it's really not the hardest track in the world to drive. So I feel like it being earlier in the campaign would be a little bit more fitting, because as it is right now, this doesn't feel like a red-worthy style of track. But it's still not the worst track in the world here, so I am going to give it a plus rating. And here we are with maybe the most notorious track of the campaign. It's close to track number 25, but this one has multiple giant skips in it, and the track itself, with and without the skips, in my opinion, is just a complete disaster. For its ranking here, I gave it 11th place, so it honestly could have been a lot worse, and I think the track is really saved by these skips, because I think the parts of the track that you can skip are pretty bad with the slow-mos, especially the opening jump, where you can sometimes, even pretty often, get a double slow-mo and sometimes even get a triple slow-mo. So again, I do think these cuts actually make this track better, and it could have been a little bit worse without them. So it's fairly lucky in that regard, as the ranking is going to be a minus for this track, but without the cuts, I would have given it a minus. Taking a look at the red series of tracks, we can see the Winter 24 season tying with Summer 23, and Winter 23 with 41 points, putting it in a tie for 7th place. Really not much to say about the series itself. It was just a fairly average set of tracks here, besides track number 20, which obviously rated far below average. Even an extra point on one of the tracks, I guess, would have put it in an outright lead for 7th place here. So there is that, but really just an average set of tracks in regards to other seasons. Track number 21 is an interesting track. It's mainly a bobsleigh track, but with the stadium car and the snow car this time. I don't know. The track works okay for what it is. Bobsleighs kind of take it or leave it. I don't think it's the most fun surface in the game, but it's alright. I'm kind of indifferent to it. I believe the track does fall apart a little bit at the very end. The last like 3 quick bobsleighs with the snow car feel a little bit uncontrollable because the snow car on ice really does not have a lot of steering capabilities. So you're kind of just hoping for the best there. So yeah, I do believe it falls apart a little in the later half of the track, but it still gets an all-right ranking here, getting 8th place, so dead average, so it's not the worst track in the world. It's probably going to have strong opinions from the community in general. Probably a lot of people love this track, a lot of people hate it. It's right in the middle for me, and it's also going to get a plus. Now, track number 22, in my opinion, is by far the best track of the entire campaign, and is honestly not even really close. Despite that, it's still not the best track number 22 ever made, only getting 3rd place in that regard. So, you know, it could be a little bit better in my opinions, but still, overall, an extremely good track. There's really only 2 things on this track that I feel could be improved a little bit. This penalty grass section here, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I feel like something much better could have been used in that situation, like maybe just a drift or another maybe grass or plastic turn there. Hell, maybe even an ice slide there could have been better than the penalty grass area. Also, the very start of the track where there is the plastic section, that also has a weird piece used there in order to make that turn. I wish that was a little bit different to make it a little bit smoother, but still, this is an extremely good track, and those are just 2 very minor things that I feel could have been improved. And I'm sure it comes no surprise for its rating here on the plus-minus scale. It's going to get a triple plus. I think that is fairly obvious. But again, track number 22, by far the best track of the campaign. Very, very nice. What is there to say about track number 23? I don't know. I just don't like this track, and I swear every season they have a track in a similar style to this with the reactor boost stuff. It just never is a track for me. I don't think it ever will be a track for me. I don't know. Maybe there's a group of people, or maybe the majority of players like stuff like this. But I just don't ever see myself coming around to it. Results in a slightly below average ranking, spot number 10 here. So it's not the worst track in the world. It is pretty drivable. This wall ride here is a bit weird with the reactor boost up on a wall ride. Doesn't really work all that well. It's a bit strange. But the track as a whole, it's alright. Again, just not really a track for me. I am going to give it a minus, so, you know, I really wish they would stop doing tracks like this, but again, maybe more players like them than I do, so it is what it is. So track number 24, despite its below average ranking here, getting spot number 9 for me, track number 24 has just have been very good in the past, so a bit unfortunate in that regard, but I do believe this is a pretty good ice track, and the first proper ice track in the later parts of seasons, since the winter 23 season, or maybe even the fall 22 season. So it's been over a year since we had an ice track of this quality. Now with that said, I do think there are some flaws with this track. First of all, the opening of the track. You need such a shallow and perfect ice slide in that section that the start just turns into a restart simulator. The water section we just passed, you can very easily jump out of it for no reason at all, and that kind of goes with the hatred that I have towards water in this game. And the final ice slide here that we are coming up on, it's very easy to gear out of, so, you know, that's a little bit annoying to drive the entirety of the track and lose a gear on the final turn. But it's not the worst thing in the world, still a very good track overall, and I'm going to give it a plus plus. And here we are with the final track of the entire campaign, and probably the most notorious track of the campaign. We got the snow car on this one, and overall just a extremely tough track, especially as far as the author time goes. It took me like 2.5 hours to get this one, which is probably about 2 hours longer than I spent on any other track. So yeah, quite a difficult one here. It's really not helped by the landing bugs that you get in the snow car. But I do still think it is a pretty good track overall, and the removal of those landing bugs will certainly help it out a little bit, but still got a above average ranking for me here, getting spot number 6. The worst defenders on the track are the grass downhill there, where it feels almost guaranteed that you're going to get a landing bug. We also have the turn immediately following, where if you just have so much speed there, it feels almost impossible to make the turn. And you can say the same thing about this upcoming turn as well here. If you have a lot of speed, very tough to make this one. The jump down into the water is also kind of weird in my opinion. I don't really care for the very end here. You can landing bug in the water as well, lose a lot of time there. So yeah, massive problems with the snow car in general, but I do believe the route on the track is pretty darn good. If they do fix the hitbox on the snow car to reduce those landing bugs, this one might jump up a few rankings, and I would also give it a plus plus. But for now, my ranking will be a plus. Looking at the Black Series of tracks, we can see the Winter 24 season tying with Spring 23, scoring 44 points and tying it for 8th place. Honestly, this is a bit unfortunate for this series because I think it was a solid set of tracks overall, especially if you like track number 23 more so than I do. That was really the only outlier for me. All the other tracks are pretty solid. We also have track number 24, which got below average points despite it being a very good ice track. Just unfortunate that it was against a pretty high competition in its own category. Switching over to the entire season here, the Winter 24 season scored 219 points overall, and that put it in 9th place. Now, 9th place is probably not where you want to be, below average score, not really great. The good news is that we got 22 points down to the next worst campaign, so that is a fairly large gap, and there's only 9 points difference up into 6th place, and that could easily be made up with some of the snow car tracks in the car, getting some bug fixes. It could certainly help in that regard, and I will certainly re-rank some of those with those fixes if they do help. Here we can see the rankings for every single track, and we got some few takeaways from this as well. Firstly, you can see that there are no tracks in the bottom 3 or even bottom 4, which cannot be said for any other season. So this season did great in that regard. The bad thing though, there's only one track in the top 3 and an additional one in the top 4. So only 2 tracks in the top 4 is not all that great, not a ton of memorable tracks. And we can see why it scored 219 points and landed in 9th place, because a large majority of the tracks, 18 out of the 25 tracks, landed here between spot number 6 and spot number 10. So most tracks fell in the slightly above average to slightly below average range. If you want to look into this more, feel free to pause the video. Otherwise, there will be a link in the description that you can go and look at this. Here at the end, I figured I'd give some final thoughts on this campaign and campaigns in general. First of all, I feel like the campaigns just need an extra layer of difficulty. Feels like a lot of the time some white tracks, and it can even bleed into the green and blue series of tracks, there are a lot of just throwaways and very boring tracks. So I feel if you made the green series of tracks a new white series of tracks, add that extra layer of difficulty at the end as well, the black series becomes harder. I feel like this could be a very good change. And secondly, I think this kind of goes hand in hand with difficulty as well, but the early tracks, white through blue, really just need to be a little bit longer. Currently, they like to end them like 25 to the early 30-second range, and I feel like if they add an extra 5 to 10 seconds to make them at least 35 seconds to somewhere in the early 40-second range, I think this would help add a lot of substance to some of these very basic tracks. And I think this is the reason why the earlier tracks, especially the 2021 seasons through the 2022 seasons, rated so much higher for me. You always see those at the top of my list, and I think that is because of the track length. Those tracks generally fell into that range, so they have that little bit extra substance on those tracks, made them a little bit harder, and yeah, it just made them that much better. What currently scares me about the future of the campaigns in this game is the addition of new cars. I think the addition of new cars is great, but as far as the campaign goes, I think it is going to hurt it, because if you're only having one car per track per series, I feel like it is only going to get more and more basic from here on out. And honestly, I'm not really sure how they can avoid that. So yeah, those are some things I feel like could improve future seasons of this game. I highly doubt they'll see this and they won't implement them. But yeah, that is something that I feel is much needed for future campaigns. But that is going to conclude today's video. Let me know in the comments below on what rankings you agree with, what rankings do you disagree with, and how are you feeling about this season's campaign so far. If you have not done so already, please like the video and subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next season with the next tier list.